Hi, guys, and welcome to the latest episode of the Podium Pod. And here today, we have a very special guest joining us. We have former Australian Boomers player Chris Anstey joining the show today. Chris, how are you?
No, I'm good, Ben. I apologise. I'm sitting in my car. I'm up in the country. We didn't quite get the audio right. I apologise. I hope it sounds okay, but thanks for having me on.
Well, you're loud and clear. And again, if only the listeners could see that I can see your hands. It looks like you've been doing some hard work. We might circle back to that at the end of the show. We wanted to start. Obviously, the World Cup is just around the corner. It's very good topical at the moment. I wanted to take it back a couple of decades and talk about your experience playing for the Boomers before we get into the current day. And I wanted to just ask off the top, when I say World Cups and playing for the Boomers, do you have any flashbacks personally from your early experiences playing for Australia at major tournaments like this?
You know what? Yeah, I do, of course. And one of the biggest highlights and probably lowlights was the Sydney Olympics. But before that, I've always considered myself really naive insofar as I sort of think everyone's beatable. And the first time I represented the Boomers in a major tournament was in the World Championships in Athens, which was a couple of years before the Sydney Olympic Games. And the younger version of me had a reasonable temper, and even back to my tennis days. And we were playing Brazil, and we were down at half time, and I certainly hadn't played well. And my way into the locker room, I sort of kicked a bin, and I was so mad that I hadn't played well. And Barry Barnes spent the whole time having a go at me at half time. And I looked at him, I'm like, mate, you might want to worry more about beating Brazil than worrying about me kicking a bin. And back then we always had such an underdog mentality that I don't think we truly believed. And that came from the coaching staff. I don't think we truly believed that we could beat the US or beat the powerhouses. And if we got close, sort of was near enough, was good enough. And that sort of bothered me. And so when we got to Sydney in 2000 and didn't start the tournament well and found our way in the final four, to lose those two games how we did really easily was really, really disappointing. We sort of changed the way we were playing and the way we'd been winning, and then sort of went back to what hadn't been working and got blown out two games in a row. So the Sydney Olympic Games and early experiences with the Boomers were incredible pride to put on the jersey. And I say to represent my teammates, my family, my friends, and even before the country. And that was a great sense of pride. But in some of the highlights, walking into the Sydney Olympic Stadium, fast forward 2 weeks, was one of the lowlights of my basketball career, because up to current day, when the Boomers, I sat there with every other basketball fan in the world and watched him win a bronze medal over Slovenia. I had my 7-year-old son on my lap, and I was trying to explain the significance to him. And as excited as much as we celebrated, there was still that sense of, geez, I wish we had been able to do this 23 years ago. And I'm sure some of the guys I spoke to that night would have loved to have done it even earlier still. So it's great to see where the Boomers are at. It's great to see where the Opals are at. And we've always aspired, well, certainly some of us have always wanted to put ourselves in the top few in the world like the Opals continually have. So some really, really fantastic memories, some really disappointing losses because we weren't able to win that medal. But it's been a fun ride.
I just want to hit on the Sydney Olympics there again. By happenstance, we were speaking with Andrew Gaze over the weekend, and he was telling us about his experiences at the Olympic Games and how it wasn't just a basketball tournament. There was the whole eyes of a nation on you guys. And I think it's a great parallel to what's happening with the Soccer World Cup at the moment, where we've got these athletes that are really pushing the sport forward, and we've got the whole nation looking at them. You touched on it a little bit there, but can you just unpack a little bit further what it was like playing at a home Olympic Games when you've got the entire nation on you, yet at the same time, like the soccer girls are going through at the moment, you were trying to do a job and trying to focus on basketball despite all the distractions going on?
Yeah, look, I've always believed that the biggest distraction in the Olympic Games are the Olympic Games themselves. And, our most disappointing loss was in the first round. And, I guess the lesson I learned from Sydney, I'd never go to another opening ceremony again. You're on your feet for 7 hours a day. If you went back and looked at the records of teams that didn't attend versus teams that did, they win almost every time. It's certainly not the preparation you want for one of the most important games of your life. If you're back at home in a regular game, you'd be resting up, rehabbing, and preparing for the game, not getting your arousal levels up, being on your feet all day, turning up to the game fatigued. But it was an incredible memory. But 2 days later, we lost the first game because we were flat. I never felt. I mean, it was fun. It was fun playing in front of our home crowd. It wasn't fun losing. I certainly wasn't one of those ones that felt the weight of expectation or pressure. And I guess guys like Andrew Gaze and Shane Heal, who probably shouldered a lot of the scoring responsibility and had done for a long time, may have felt that a little bit differently. But for me, I had a smaller role and enjoyed the hell out of playing those games.
And the underdog mentality that you touched on before, and you were mentioning that it was kind of ingrained into the culture of the team. You mentioned it off the top, coming up, it looked like you were pretty confident in yourself and pretty confident of what you can achieve. How did that, I suppose, underdog mentality or that mindset, how was it like for you going through that? And I suppose balancing the fact that you were an elite level athlete with the fact that going up against Team USA was an entirely different step up for the program at the time.
I think the Sydney Olympics was the first time, certainly internally, that we actually believed that we could beat anyone. And we had T-shirts made up, MOB on the front. We didn't tell anyone what it meant, but essentially people assumed it was a mob of kangaroos or something like that. But for us, it was medal or bust. And then anything less than a medal was a failure. And so we got so close. And again, one of the most disappointing parts of that was, we got to the press conference and they finally asked Barry Barnes what it stood for. He said men's Olympic basketball. He didn't own the fact that we failed. It was an equal best finish in men's basketball. And while that's fantastic, that wasn't what we'd spoken about for months and through the tournament. So that was really disappointing. And when you hear of gold standards and gold culture in today's team, I think they truly believe it, and I think they should.
And I'm just interested, when you mentioned your 7-year-old son before, when you were sitting down watching the Paralympic tournament and seeing the team get over the line and win a medal in that case, I'm just interested, you as a fan now, sitting back at a different stage in life, watching the team, what's it like for you when you're watching these games now? Do you turn into a fanboy? Do you turn into a bit of a parent? Are you pretty relaxed with it all? What's your mindset when you watch the team play now?
It's definitely interested, definitely excited for what could potentially happen, but also realistic in understanding how difficult this is. And so with that game against Slovenia, I spent a lot of time explaining to Hunter that this had been a team that I'd played for as well. And this was the game that we'd gotten to and one we weren't able to win, and no one had ever been able to do it. So, and for him, if Australia's able to win this game, they'll do something that Dad was never able to do, people before Dad were never able to do. And I sort of had the sense that there might be a chance. And you probably remember it was an 8 or 8:30 game at night in Melbourne where I was. And so for a 7-year-old to be up till 10:30 watching a game of basketball was a stretch. But I always remembered back to when I was young and Dad woke me up in the middle of the night to watch the America's Cup when we beat America for the first time. And I never forgot it. And maybe that was part of my naivety, that I always believed that, you only have to be able to do it once, but you can do it. So no, it was a fun night to share with Hunt. It was a fun night to share with a few friends. COVID was on, so I probably should say I was there with an intimate partner or something, but we had a few around at the house, and there was no way I was going to watch that game by myself and not share it with some of the people that I'd gone through the journey with.
And you yourself now, I dare say there's a generation of players that a generation of people that are playing the sport and watching the sport that would know you for as much now as showing up on Instagram and doing your tours over to the US as they would as someone that used to play basketball. So with what we've been speaking about and the fact that we're sitting here now in 2023 and people like Josh Giddey is modeling that blueprint that you were doing 20 years ago, What's it like sitting back as someone that is an elder statesman of this program and seeing that it has developed from what we're talking about to where it is now?
Yeah, look, you mentioned Josh. One of the things I'm probably proudest of is the way I got to the NBA years and years ago. That no one had ever done it that way before, and no one had been drafted from the NBL. You've seen the Next Stars program, and it's nice to know that maybe there was one or two people that thought it might just be possible. Back in 1997, and you look at kids growing up now. They you could turn on the NBA any morning here in Australia and watch a game, and you're likely to see an Aussie. It's incredible how accessible the NBA is for Australian basketball now. It's incredible how accessible we are in Australia to the NBA, the scouts and the front office, and the world's certainly gotten a lot smaller since I was being recruited. It's much easier to get game film, but it just takes seeing people do the thing that you want to do, and surrounding yourself with it to make it more possible. And look, I admire, I sit back and I enjoy Josh and Dyson and Paddy Mills and Joe Ingles, Jock, all these guys. I wish I knew back then what I knew now. Sometimes I'm a little bit, I get a little bit upset that I might have got there a little bit too early, or maybe kept a generation early. I would have loved to have had a swing at it now, or had a second swing after some time in the NBL. But no, I allow myself to be a fan. With so many Aussies over there, you mentioned the tours. It's great to pull the curtain back for a while for some basketball people here in Australia, and share my experiences and share my relationships as much as anything with them. And we've only just started doing it, but hopefully it's something we continue to do each year.
And just quickly, one last one on the past, touching on when you did get drafted and the year before that. Again, you mentioned it was a different age, no social media, no streaming video, no DVDs even. Like, do you remember, was there much contact from the NBA in the lead up to that draft and that season? Or what was that process like being halfway around the world?
Just phone calls. And in the season I was with the Magic, those orange NBA folders started turning up the games. I tried so hard it just felt like they were watching me every step of the way, and I hated it. The best game I had that year was the day after or the weekend after I got drafted, when I knew it was all done. And there was no pressure. I didn't feel like anyone was watching me anymore. But yeah, no, there were definitely a few phone calls. Draft day was very different. I lifted weights in the morning with the Magic guys. We went down to the TV studios in South Melbourne. They had the draft streamed in. The team was there. My family was there. A couple of close friends were there, and we had no idea I'd be drafted that high. I had a guarantee from Chicago with the last pick in the first round, and I got drafted. I felt guilty looking at guys like Sam McKinnon, who probably deserved to be there more than me, and Frankie Drimmick and Jason Smith, who wanted to do the same thing. But we did that. I did a few interviews. I put a hat on and I went back to training, and we trained and had a good session. And like I say, beat the Sydney Kings that following weekend, and I had a ripper.
There were no pink suits or colourful runway struts back in the day.
I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt and a Southeast Melbourne Magic polo shirt. I reckon you'll find.
So just quickly, you said the Bulls had promised you. So what? You would have linked up with the Bulls for the last of their championship years if that went through.
Oh,
right?
I could have stuffed it up for him. That was the plan. The plan, yeah. If I was available with, I think it was the 30th pick back then. If I was there on pick 30, the last pick in the first round, they were going to draft me. So that would have been interesting. It would have been a whole different experience, an incredible journey, but kind of like the one I went through, in its own way.
Yeah, well, we missed you being on The Last Dance. That would have been a completely different kettle
I
of
was
fish.
on it for about 2 seconds. And you talk about the current generation not remembering what you did. That's all they knew me for. A lot of them was, I saw you on The Last Dance elbowing Dennis Rodman. I did a few other things, but thanks.
Well, to quickly flash forward to the Boomers and the World Cup we've got coming up. Again, the place that we just want to start here is we know there is so much talent on this team, that goes without saying, but taking a step back and objectively, well, we're Australians trying to objectively look at this team relative to the world. Like, what are your thoughts on the strengths and relative weaknesses of this Boomers team relative to what they're going to be facing over the next month?
Yeah, we're tiny. I don't think I've seen a Boomers team. I can't remember a Boomers team this small. We're going to have to come up the floor, defensively, and I know Gorgon's very well prepared to do that. We're going to have to play fast offensively, fly the ball down the floor, look at early baskets, and get that thing moving side to side. If we don't, really excited to see what Josh Giddey brings, what Dyson Daniels brings. This will be the first time I think that someone who played in the NBA last year doesn't make the team. Which is almost it sounds incredible when you rewind a few years that could even be possible. But look, objectively, the way I see it is teams. We're so isolated geographically in Australia. We understand that we're improving, but we forget to sometimes take a look at how much other nations are improving, and you've just got to look at the lineup that Canada is going to roll out, and in the Olympic, even after this World Cup, you look at the teams: Greece, Serbia. Anyone can roll out. They're going to roll out an NBA guy who, on any given day, can beat you. So the goal for the Boomers is to win a gold medal or to go better than the bronze medal. But objectively, for me, there's still a world where the Boomers could finish fifth or sixth, play incredibly well, and should be proud of what they've done, because there are some incredible nations out there who can beat you. And I just think sometimes we forget how good the rest of the world really is.
Yeah, it's a great point, isn't it? And I tend to agree with you that the baseline for this team is getting through the group stages and doing that well and getting into the knockout games. But as you mentioned, it could be France, it could be Luka Doncic in his squad, it could be the Team USA squad that we see that's a bit reduced from what it normally is, but is still full of talented players. And I like that you mentioned Canada as well. For mine, they're going to have probably the best player in the tournament in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and a deep team that goes even deeper and runs even deeper than we do. So when you look at all of that, in your mind, is Team USA still the team that we should be expecting to win this? Or do you think a team like Canada can actually do the job?
I mean, Canada might have the best two players. I think Jamal Murray's every bit as good as most guards in the world as well. So just dealing with that is going to be a handful. The USA, we don't match their athleticism. We don't match their speed. And the one thing, other than size, that we're probably lacking is a guy where you put the ball in their hands and say, go get me a basket. We don't have a Giannis. We don't have a Luka. We don't have a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander where you just, Josh is incredible, but he's not going to go and get you 35. Patty Mills isn't a one-on-one breakdown. The ball's got to move for us to be successful. So, we'll make sure we try to highlight our strength. But I'm fascinated to watch this tournament because I genuinely do not know what's going to happen. I don't have a prediction for you. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a major upset that I couldn't even begin to guess right now. But I hope we're not on the end of it, unless it's us beating the USA or something like that.
Yeah, well, randomly, I read during the week that the US has only won 3 of the last FIBA World Cups, 3 of the last 8, sorry. So that's a 37% strike rate. And you compare that against the Olympic Games, where it seems like the talent disparity flows through in the Olympic arena because it's the tournament that draws the most attention. But these World Cups almost seem like they're set up for the upsets to flow and the variability to come. And we saw it last time, 4 years ago, when, again, like you say, the Boomers were 1 free throw away from getting into the gold medal game. And that's not to disparage Paddy, because we wouldn't have been there without him. But at the end of the day, sometimes it just does come down to those small moments and a bit of luck, doesn't it, to get over the edge when you're talking about such talented teams.
Absolutely. I mean, you always need luck to win something. And sometimes luck comes in the form of you didn't get any injuries. And you're at full strength for the entire tournament. It's there's always going to be a story to tell, but no, it's you're right though. I mean, the foul was a foul on Paddy, and that I think that's the thing that really impresses me with the way the group packed up again and didn't drop their heads and stayed. With other nations, with other teams, it could have look. This is all too hard. It's not meant to happen. That was our chance. We're not going to get it again, but they went one better. So for me, on the back of Rio, that's what made in my mind, the medal even more special because of what had happened in the previous Olympic Games. But you're right, there's going to be a moment. There are going to be a lot of moments in this tournament where you look there and go, "Wow, what if?" Again, I hope we're not on the wrong side of that conversation.
And just one last one to get out of here. We touched on this earlier, but again, as someone that has lived this Australian basketball journey for the last 30, 40 years, to be sitting here now at a point where, like you mentioned, we'll have NBA players that don't make the team. We'll have all this talent base on the men's and the women's side. When you reflect back to where you started 30 or 40 years ago, what are the feelings or the emotions just flashing forward and flashing back that 40-year journey and seeing where Australian basketball is positioned today?
I just think excitement. It's exciting to watch. It's exciting to have been a part of it. Um, I've coached for 12 years. I've been around the game. It's exciting to share some of the things I learned and hope that others that you sort of are around for short periods of time have the opportunity to have some of the same experiences. And you always hope that teams that go after you go better than you. And the Boomers have certainly done that. I've got a daughter who plays. I hope she does. If she continues playing better than what I did and has some of the same experiences, she certainly had a better junior career than what I did. So, no, look, I sit back, I pick up a beer, I put my feet up, and I enjoy the journey.
Well, all right, Chris, we appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for joining us. And no predictions are needed, but let's just hopefully predict that the Boomers are standing atop the dais in 3 or 4 weeks. Thanks for joining us.
It'll be great to see. Thanks for having me, Ben.